Okay, it looks like it started. All right. So I will get started. Introduction in case anyone watches this. I'm Gina. I'm a senior product designer for Runner Fleet, and this is our first design CI/CD UX review meeting. Very exciting. So I wanted to share an issue that is specific to disabling or enabling shared runners. And the problem is at the group level. Like we know, there's many, if you're at a top group, there can be many nested levels of groups and projects within there. And what we've heard is that it is really difficult to enable or disable shared runners from that top level group, because right now we only allow you to disable, and once you do that, it will cascade down the entire tree of whatever's underneath. But then if you try to enable again from that top level group, it actually only enables it for that top group. It doesn't do anything for the groups and projects below. And as you can see, like that could be really difficult if someone mistakenly disabled runners and wanted to re-enable again, they wouldn't be able to do that. But then another thing I wanted to share, another use case where this impacts people, which I've added a screenshot into our doc, is we heard from a customer, oh, we accidentally disabled shared runners. Now we want to enable them again, but we can't do it for all the groups and projects. And so some people want to have that setting cascade to all groups and projects, but some others, due to security restraints or, like whatever it happens to be, only certain groups can use certain runners. So there are other people that may want to pick and choose which groups and projects they want those shared runners to be available to. So this is a really great, Tomas, one of our internal GitLab team members, went through a use case of where that, like how that makes sense. So for the design that I'm coming up with, our iteration, I will say in between right now, since we don't support that re-enabling cascading effect, we add a warning dialogue now when you do disable shared runners, saying like you won't be able to easily enable them again. You're going to have to go into each group and project and enable them. Are you sure you want to do this? So that's our first iteration. But what I'd like to do is make this more of an ideal experience in general, supporting both of those main use cases as apply this to everything underneath the top level group, or pick and choose which ones I want it to apply to. And the person who would be doing this is a platform engineer. This would specifically be group owners because they're the only ones who can access the settings in a group. An admin could do this too, but it's likely just a group owner. And I talked about the ideal outcomes, and then I'll talk through these 2 points. The hardest part of this problem to solve, I didn't write this, but I think it will be being able to display a ton of, potentially thousands of nested groups and projects under that top level group. Because we know that this is specifically an issue for self-managed customers, because they'll be the ones who are creating their own shared runners. So typically those are huge users and they could have tons of groups and projects. So that's a struggle I know that we will deal with. And then a known constraint just about how this works today. I brought this up in the beginning. So when you disable the shared runners, it cascades, but if you want to re-enable, it does not. So this was a technical constraint because I guess cascading in the other direction would be a very large database call, and it would cause a huge performance negative impact. And I guess it was also really difficult to do development wise. This was years ago, so we haven't really worked on figuring out if this is possible again. And the workaround is for users to go to each individual group or project and enable the shared runners for each one, which you could see as being very tedious. I'll pause there. Are there additional questions or anything that I want to talk about before I go into Figma?
Gina, I have a follow-up question to the last point. I'm not sure if you already mentioned, I'm trying to remember everything you said, but what is the risk? Like if users cannot perform that task, what's the worst thing that can happen?
I guess we could think about it as if one of those projects, that wouldn't be a huge deal. I guess the risk would just be that it takes longer to re-enable shared runners, which may help you get like a production fix out. But I was rethinking that because like if only one project needed those shared runners, you could easily go into settings and enable it for them. I guess if all of the projects and groups needed them, like that would be the biggest risk. They wouldn't have access to shared runners and they'd have to create their own runners. Yeah, I don't know if that's a true use
all
case.
The pipelines will stop. That's big.
Yeah, yes. Unless they have, so if a user was only dependent on shared runners, correct, they wouldn't be able to run any pipelines. Yeah.
And then I have a question.
Yeah.
I hope articulate. So it sounds like we have like an either or approach where they either can do a top level or they have to configure each one.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It's but it's not like it's not ideal, I will say. Like we ended up with that today, but that's not what we want in the future.
And then just to make sure, like technically, can you speak to explorations you did around allowing them to just select individual projects where they cannot use top level?
Yes, that's what I would show next. Should I do that? I can go into that now, actually. Might help.
Okay, so that's possible. Yeah.
It seems like it would be. We just need to be able to design it.
Hey, that's good.
Yes.
Okay.
It would actually be easier than having to like go do the whole cascade all at once thing.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Ones. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Erica's comment is similar to my question here. Like, could we kind of like have a setting? I'm of course already solutionizing, but I'm thinking that if technically it will be a very, just not just complex but constraining action to perform, right? To do everything cascading and then reverse as well. I'm thinking if there's a way that the system could just send at the group level those kind of like, I'm trying to find the word in English for that, but we could separately individually run the tests in the background for each of the projects within the group.
Yes.
That is,
yeah, I think that's I think from a database perspective, that would be feasible and easier than trying to do everything at once if they were selecting something. Yeah, and I think also as for the use case where groups are dealing with security issues, where maybe they don't want to re-enable shared runners for all of their groups and projects, this would make it easier for them too, because they can bulk select many at once rather than having to go into individual ones. Deepika, do you want to voice your comments now?
I mean, this could go at the end.
I think it would.
Yeah.
The terminology. Yeah, I agree. Okay. All right. Let's come back to that. So I'm going to share my Figma now. I put a link to this in the doc as well. Okay, so this is how it looks today. If you haven't been into CI/CD settings for a group, it's just a switch, which makes it seem like it will actually work when you switch it on and off. So it's very misleading. And I tried to give you like an idea of how this works, which I've explained, but visually it's a little bit easier to see. So in this group, like the use case here would be that we need to restrict this group from using shared runners to save costs, let's say, because every time you use runners, you're paying money. So you want to disable all the runners for all the groups and projects in this group. So I put that switch off, and then I come back and like our infrastructure group has figured out how to reduce costs. Now I want to come back and enable shared runners for all those groups and projects. So I toggle it on, but it only impacts group A. So now I have to go into each individual subgroup project and all that and enable them in settings. So what I'm proposing now is to be able to allow users to choose groups and projects that they want to disable or enable shared runners from any top level group. So as long as it has some type of nested things in it, you would be able to pick and choose. And when I started like brainstorming this, this is kind of like what I was thinking, but I was struggling again because you can have many nested groups and projects. Like, how do I display those? That's probably the biggest thing that I was struggling with. So if I'm thinking this is going to stay in settings because I think that makes the most sense. And that would mean that there's like a read-only version where shared runners are enabled for these groups and projects, and shared runners are disabled for these ones. And then when you edit it, there's some way to be able to select all of the groups and projects so that you don't have to like go through and click them all. And then there's also some way to search. But I also find like we don't really use a pattern like this where you have these two forms, and because you're really just pushing something back and forth. So yeah, this is kind of like what I've brainstormed so far, but I'm really looking for feedback on how best to be able to display like this enormous amount of potentially thousands of groups and projects that they have to select from.
Are we handling, sorry, someone with a speaker. Are we handling information like this anywhere else in the product, Gina? I'm trying to think, like, for example, when we are, one example I can think of is when we bulk edit issues or epics, right? Where we can, add labels or remove labels to the issues in the issue list. That's the first one that comes to my mind. And I'm wondering if others can think of examples of how we handle like a large amount of data in the product today. So I can make this selection and change of status.
I think I brought some patterns. So I didn't think of the issues, but that's interesting. I was also thinking of just like where we visualize subgroups and projects at a group level, and thinking that pattern could be helpful. But issues and even like this is different because in settings, like you're not just going there to view all the subgroups and projects that are in that group. So we don't have like a pre-existing list to use like this, where then we could say bulk update or whatever. And then I also thought of token access, because you can customize the access by just pasting a project path, which is also a little, go ahead.
There's a Figma file that I worked on when I was in the previous group. I just couldn't find the issue, so I'll just add the Figma file here.
Okay.
Sorry, that's the wrong place. So, and this issue was about like when you have a certain quota assigned to a particular group or a particular instance, how does that like drizzle down to all the groups, subgroups, projects inside that? And did I not add the link? Sorry. And like what we were trying to do is we were allowing users to set a subgroup, group, and project level quota, like limit the quota for those projects. So it was similar. I think I also shared it with you when I was working on it.
Yep.
Oh, okay. So you were listing them all and then, okay.
Yeah.
And then for these, so if like, what if like test 13 project was a project under subgroup 3? How were you thinking that that would work? Or were you just skipping the?
I do remember like the team had a discussion that instead of showing how these were inherited, let's just put the path there and that would just solve the problem.
Yeah.
I think the challenge with the path is that the scalability, right? It can be so confusing when you have that path or like the breadcrumbs, whatever I want to call, like the repeated components on the list. Can be challenging. And then Gina, a follow-up question to you. I'm wondering if in your file, in your Figma file, you have examples of how other tools are doing this type of interaction today. Because I'm thinking, like, how does Google Cloud, like, how, when you're managing, for example, your clusters, and you can have, I don't know, many hundreds and sometimes thousands of items on the list. How are they doing that today? How do you solve that task?
I mean, at least for runners, when there's multiple. I'm struggling right now answering it. Okay, hold on. We still, I'm trying to think. I guess, yeah, technically we started doing this for runners because we started listing the data out. But yeah, this is difficult. I guess one of the things that immediately comes to my mind is there's usually like a lot of data that comes with each one of these items, and showing the most important metadata is super important and also helps you like minimize the list of what they're looking at. And then we also added like bulk actions, which also help the admin manage them more efficiently. So I guess those two things could also be carried over to this effort.
Yeah, I'm thinking the hardest part about visualizing like how these all connect in with each other is like you were saying, if you select the like top level group, it doesn't select everything underneath it. So like that tree format doesn't really work because you select the top group, it's not selecting everything under, but people would expect it to. So I get why that's like a difficulty, because you can't really show it in like the tree version because it would just be assumed it's selecting everything under it.
Right. Which then like, because originally I was thinking maybe we could imagine these icons are checkboxes, but then you're dealing with multiple bulk checkboxes almost, because they would expect, okay, if I select this one, it selects everything underneath it.
Yeah.
Is there any like common criteria that people will look at when thinking of making that selection? Now we're thinking of the name, right? And the hierarchy in terms of, this is a group or this is a subgroup. But when they have that huge list, it's very complex, maybe deep hierarchy, what would they be looking at when, like, I'm thinking of the contrast, like I'm going to this list and I'm just trying to select everything and then, enable, disable something, versus I'm going to kind of cherry pick which projects and groups I want to change. Is there anything in common that users will look for that we can surface in order to, make this task less manual, right, and more intuitive? I'm not sure if that.
Yeah,
That's
that's my comment too, just to end. It's like users will not even remember the names of the projects at all. And so it's like they need different things about their use context to like make the decision. So like maybe tags, labels, the environment, who owns it, and the type of access they have would be candidates. Right?
Yes.
Maybe there's like AI behind the scenes that's like making a recommendation for them or something.
Yeah.
But this is like gonna blow their mind. Like it blows my mind even thinking about how they think about it. And it's just another thing to keep in mind that I'm like really now able to say about users is that they have the facility to understand all of this, but it's not something that they're working with day to day.
Right.
So they have to like sit there and like load all of this in their minds. And so, yeah, any work that we can do for them to like help them segment and recreate that context would be really helpful.
Yeah. That's a great point. I think that the metadata you were just talking about, Erica, would really help them make the decision, especially owner and maybe like the last update in that project, the last commit or something. Especially if like security rules were changed or something like that, that would be important to show. Okay, yeah, I like that. You're right, it's not just the name. It's definitely not. And then I also, my other point was, I'm gonna go back and look at past research to see if people were saying exactly what they're looking for, like what context they need to be able to make the decision. Yeah.
Yeah,
And then,
uh,
oh no, no.
platform engineers, like jobs to be done differs from what the admin is trying to do on the that console
Yeah.
versus on the, like when somebody is in the settings, like how much elaborate information would they require to make a decision?
Yeah. Are you asking that or are you saying think about that?
I'm like just speaking my mind right now.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's good and something that, yeah, I should look at also. Erica, did you want to voice something too?
This just reminds me of a design pattern that you have in Qualtrics where you're able to like create variables for the data and you can like bucket them. And so you like, so it gives you all your variables and then you can like aggregate them. So an example would be you're trying to take, so like a respondent answers business size. So there's like me, and then there's like all the small, medium business sizes, like below 500, you want to group into one. Does that make sense? So you can like take it back and forth. And then, so I'm thinking like something like that might be helpful where they can like bucket them.
Yeah.
Because then, yeah. And one thing to then add on to that would be like, you want to bucket things. So then you need a label for like outlining what happens when it goes in that bucket.
Yeah.
So like, I'm going to make this variable. I'm going to add all of these little details to this type of bucketed variable. And like, what does that mean for my analysis steps later is the analogy. Right? Or like, yeah, so disabled for like, what is it? So let's say you have, yeah, so is it just binary shared runners are enabled or disabled? Is that the,
Yeah, those are the only two options. Yeah.
so you just, when you're explaining that, I would just explain the implications of it to them.
Yeah.
If
like
I
what it
put,
means.
Yeah, and I can give you a screenshot of what that bucketing behavior looks like. I don't know if we want to add a new thing, but like conceptually to me, that's what it is, as opposed to like toggling, it would be just like drag and dropping it.
Yeah. Yeah, if
Uh,
you want to send me a screenshot, that'd be helpful.
Okay. But I think the other comment there is just have some text underneath it explaining the implications of putting it in that bucket. Like
Yeah.
what happens there? If I put it in the disabled bucket, what happens?
Yes.
And then one more would be that we know that there's going to be some projects which they just are going to need control over. And so they're not going to want to use shared runners. And so helping them to find those will be helpful.
Helping them to find projects that they do not want control of. Is that what you said?
That they're going to want control of, like they're not going to want to relinquish to the shared runners. Just because of
Okay.
what we hear about it is like intellectual property, but also just like precision of control. Like this is, I'm like working in video games and this is related to the latency for my users. And so I'm never going to let you have a shared runner on it.
Mm,
So that's just one thing we see in the research is there's certain, and it's probably related to production, but there's just certain things that they don't want to use shared runners for.
yeah. Yeah, I could see that.
So that, and also that would be another thing to add in there. Like if it's disabled, this might be because your team wants control over this in production, right? Or like latencies are important to you, blah, blah, blah. Something
Yeah.
like that. Like considerations for why they would want to put it in either of those buckets.
I see. Okay. Okay. Yeah, all right. Because. All right. Let me come back to the doc.
I added another question there, Gina. What is the smallest thing that we can do today to help solve this problem or help users in the next milestone, next iteration of this? So trying to think small before we wrap up.
Yep. Oh, it kills me to think this way because sometimes I'm like, I know that this isn't going to be the ideal solution. But I would say the smallest step would be providing them some flexibility in selecting which groups or projects they want to enable or disable runners for. So it's not just enable them for all or disable for all. And I think probably the easiest way to do that is, I assume the path, I don't know. I guess I would have to talk technically about like what's easy. I guess UX wise, it would be to select projects or groups with some, just the name, I guess, but I would like there to be some metadata associated.
This might be too forward looking, but I wonder if you could have a more complex thing like policies, kind of like how Katie was working on for the policies related to cleaning up packages at one point. It's kind of like if it's old, like do this. So it's like more automated. So you could,
Yeah.
if it's owned by this person or this team and it's used in production, then. So kind of like creating a policy or a decision rule for it or an algorithm, however you want to say it, versus just manual bucketing.
Yeah.
Or so I guess there's like manual, then there's like, yeah, that would be the high end, would be creating policies based on that, right?
Yeah, automatically doing it. I agree. I don't know enough about what. I would need to learn more about the reasons why.
Or like it could recommend for you ones to think about too. That would be like a more AI version. But
Right,
or you could just set a policy like if it's used in this environment or whatever it is, always use a shared runner.
hmm But I guess what I'm saying is like, I don't know if that's what's impacting. Yeah, if they use those things to impact their decision on enabling shared runners.
Yeah, I think it will. I think
Okay.
yeah, based on what we know. And I like did some work with Darren and we looked mainly at the reason it was related to why they would go to SaaS, why would they would put everything onto SaaS in the first place. And it's like security, performance, and control.
Okay,
And those things relate back down to I need control over secrets. I need control over what's in production.
yeah.
Okay.
I like that idea. That's cool.
I know that we are a little bit over time. I'm finding the link to the package cleanup policies here, Gina, and adding to the
Okay.
doc for you. And then I also took notes of some action items. So please have a look at it later. Before we wrap up, is there anything else anyone wants to share in terms of feedback and questions that you might have?
A discussion we can like extend to non-sync channels. Do we really have to use shared word for runners?
It's a great question. Yeah, I would love to talk about that another time for sure. Because that's a huge, huge confusion point for everyone, even internally. So, yes.
All right.
There you have it, Ritika. It's gonna happen. And also I want to ask, do you feel like 30 minutes is enough to have the discussion? Should we next time maybe try 45? What do you feel about it?
Yeah, I think 45 would work well for things like this.
Yeah.
I'll update the invite then. All right. Gina, I hope you got some answers, maybe more questions and answers now.
No, that was great. Thank you. I really appreciate the feedback.
And thanks for sharing the problem with us. Really, really happy that we're doing this now, having dedicated time for the design reviews. And then don't forget for next time, add the items, the discussion items to the doc so that we can prepare if you have something to share. And yeah, I'll upload this. Well, it's live, so I'm not going to upload this. But yeah, I'll see you all next time. Have a nice rest of your day. Bye, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.